story of one of our services, and I can see our fantastic OTs, Ruth and Victoria and Lee, who is with them, who have come to talk to us about our occupational therapy services. So we are delighted to have you with us, and we are going to hand over to you. Natalie will all support you with any slides that you want to use, but please do introduce yourself, and you are very, very welcome.
Lovely, thank you for having us this morning. We're delighted to be with you and to share some of our work around occupational therapy. So I'm Ruth Farrer. I am the clinical lead occupational therapist for the community adult mental health team. So that's covering Huntingdon, Peterborough, Fenland, Cambridge, and now the new assertive outreach team as well. And also in the room I have my colleagues. So I have Victoria Hawkins, who is one of our specialist occupational therapists in the Peterborough adult locality team, and I also am very delighted to introduce Lee to you this morning, who has been working with Victoria. So you'll hear me for a little bit, and then I'm going to hand over to the people who are far more interesting to listen to than me. So really today we're just talking a little bit about Peterborough adult locality team. So although we have occupational therapy in all of the adult locality teams, we're just thinking about Peterborough this morning. So could we have our next slide, please? So for people who don't know, I'm sure you all do know, but Peterborough is one of the 4 community adult locality mental health teams, and we serve Peterborough and the surrounding areas for secondary mental health. In order to access this service, the eligibility for the adult locality team is for people who have complex needs that require specialist mental health services from multidisciplinary teams. The service is designed primarily to meet the needs of people aged 17 to 65, where the individual may be suffering from a severe mental health condition with high levels of distress, significantly impacting function and possible risks to self and others. And within our PULSE service and within all our community adult mental health service, we have occupational therapy. We will have lots of different professionals, but we're just thinking about occupational therapy today. When I came back to post, so I used to work in inpatient service, when I came back to post in July 2022, there were no occupational therapists in Peterborough adult locality team, and it was a significant risk. And one of my first jobs was to think about how do we offer that service, how do we recruit people into this way of working. Thankfully, I had some very supportive team managers and service managers who agreed that occupational therapists could be occupational therapists, which meant for us that we were not care coordinators and that we did not carry some of those other responsibilities that you see from our colleagues in the mental health teams. What that did for us was it meant that we recruited. So if I could have our next slide, please. New ways of working for OT and the locality teams meant that we now have 4 specialist occupational therapists, mixture of part-time and full-time, with a range of different skill sets. We also have 2 support workers dedicated to working alongside occupational therapy specifically, and one of those is on the apprenticeship scheme, hoping to qualify as an OT. We do not have care coordinator responsibilities, which means we can focus on being occupational therapists and for the skills of the job of living. How do we do that? So what we devised was some pathways, some intervention pathways. So our first pathway, I know the pictures probably don't necessarily represent what I'm about to say, but I thought it's slightly more interesting than looking at words. So our first pathway is our foundation pathway. This is primarily for our people who it's really hard to engage. Often people in these services have had maybe multiple opportunities to meet with people and actually find it very difficult to trust and build relationships. So one of our key things is about building rapport, having often lots of very frequent visits, but they're perhaps shorter in nature, and not focusing necessarily on mental health, focusing on people's interests and kind of core beliefs. Our functional pathway is about how are people managing and what do they want to do to support the skills that they need throughout their daily life. Sometimes that's about developing new skills, sometimes it's about reconnecting with previous things they have done, and sometimes it's about maintenance. We also have a reablement pathway. This is a very specific, targeted, goal-orientated intervention. So there would be a clear goal of perhaps using the bus, accessing college, and the work is very focused on that piece of intervention from start to finish. We also have our sensory pathway, which is as people, as humans, we are all sensory beings. That's how we interpret and experience our world. But for some people, when our sensory processing isn't effective or isn't as good as we need it to be, it can make things feel really difficult in our environment, and we can feel overwhelmed or underwhelmed. So we do a lot about regulation and helping people to support what they might need from a sensory perspective to be able to engage in their activities. We also have a vocational pathway, so we think about how we support people accessing college, open university courses. We help people develop CVs. We look at linking people up with volunteering, and then often we would then link in with our IPS service to support people going into paid employment. And we also have a group work pathway as well. So we also offer a coffee and chat style group. This is about kind of supporting people to have those social connections, having some time to kind of just chew the fat, if you like, and make some friendships along the way. We have an allotment group which we run on a Wednesday morning. We have a sensory group which is around kind of developing those sensory strategies that people might benefit from to support them in their daily activities. And we run a recovery through activity group, which again is thinking about that functional piece and how to support people to complete the tasks they need to do, with a view to accessing third sector resources and then being able to think about vocation and work also. Our next slide, please. So I have to say that when I put the presentation together, this was the data I had at the time. We have just completed our next set of data. So if anyone is interested and wants kind of further information on our occupational therapy data, then do please get in touch and I can forward that separately. But just a few points, I guess, in terms of us as a service is working in a new way, if you like. On average, we receive 13 referrals a month. We received 160 occupational therapy referrals last year, which was probably more than I was expecting at the time. So yeah, kind of definitely demonstrated a need. There was some clear evidence that previously we had definitely been working in a reablement model. So that's kind of all people thought occupational therapy could do. So there was some education around kind of the other pathways and some of the other benefits and some joint working. So yeah, the second bit there is that we had primarily delivered reablement, although more referrals were coming through for functional and sensory work. To be fair, all our pathways overlap. It's very unusual that someone would come for just one piece of work. It's likely that people would end up experiencing challenges in one or more of those areas, and we would just move across accordingly, which is the excellent skill set of the therapists in this team, because they're able to turn their hand to whichever pathway needs to happen. The average length of time with an OT working was around about 5 months, and this did mean less contact with care coordinators and potentially reducing some risks for some individuals. Next slide, please. We use different outcome measures to kind of think about whether our service is working. So we've been using the mental health. This is a mental well-being measure, sorry. And this is a self-report measure for people to use to rate their thoughts and feelings over the previous 2 weeks. That gives us an opportunity to gain kind of direct patient feedback, and as you can see that we have demonstrated a +4-point improvement, which is self-report from individuals using our occupational therapy service. Next slide, please. That should say our impact, not our impact, so apologies. One of the things we've been able to do is generate more data, which has again kind of created our ability to demonstrate that we have recruited to all posts, we have retention, so people haven't left for 2-3 years. We can gather data from our model of practice to provide evidence-based intervention. So we have MOHO data, we have TOMS data, which is therapy outcome measure data, which is the trust-wide outcome measure of choice for allied health professionals. What all of this has demonstrated for us within Peterborough locality is that we earlier in the year successfully secured a visit from the Royal College of Occupational Therapy's patron, HRH, the Princess Royal. We have also, on the back of these things, successfully had poster abstracts submitted and delivered these at conference. We are planning to do the same in the next few weeks for some more conferences, and we also have articles for publication in waiting. And there's just a little bit of patient feedback there. So hopefully that set the scene enough, because that's enough of me talking. And now I'd like to hand over to Victoria, who's going to introduce Lee to you.
Thank you. Just checking that you can hear us okay, because we're obviously slightly further back. Is that all right?
All perfect.
Thank you. So Lee and I have worked together for a couple of years on and off, and Lee has worked with the OT team. So we just thought we'd ask a few questions, and Lee can obviously tell us about his time with the OT team. So Lee, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you came to work with OT?
Yeah, I was what was the care before OT that I was in?
You were the care coordinator.
The care coordinator, and that came to an end, and it didn't have the outcome that it should have done. I was wandering around town one day and bumped into a support worker. He was quite troubled by my behaviour, and he put me in contact. He said that I probably shouldn't be wandering around by myself at that time. So he put me in contact with I think it was the sensory group that first came into it.
Yeah. So you had an assessment with the OTs, didn't you? You'd been under the care of the crisis team, you'd then gone into care coordination, and then you'd become a little bit more poorly and then been referred into OT. So you'd had some OT assessment, and then you participated, like you say, in our sensory group. So that was to kind of help you learn some regulation strategies. How do you think this group specifically helped you?
Well, at the time I was very secluded. Is the right word? I didn't trust anybody. I was having suicidal thoughts. But being around people with having voices in your head all the time, no matter where you went, was a terrible feeling. And it's strange. I was only saying to you a few minutes ago that the last few years I've been battling with having voices in my head and people watching me all the time, and now there's actually a boardroom of people watching. This is something that I wouldn't be able to do in the early stages. So I thank you for getting me this far. But sorry, I'm probably straying off from
it. Very well. So when you did the sensory group, you met other people, didn't you? But you also moved, because you like you say, you were quite isolated, but you were also quite static, weren't you?
Yeah, so it gave me the opportunity to get out of the cocoon that was my house. It was I didn't want to be around anybody because it made things worse. But coming to see people like you in a safe place was the initiation process of me then being in and around other people. And over a period of time, those people I began to trust because they were on a similar path. And so discussing things with other people, it kind of brought me out my shell and didn't want me to be on my own so much. And I realised it was helping. I realised at that point as well that I've always been thick-skinned and pig-headed, that could manage myself and I would come through it. But I realised at that point that I definitely needed more help from other people. I couldn't do it myself.
So when you'd been to the sensory group and you'd kind of built a bit of confidence, You then joined our ASDA coffee and chat group, part of our reablement pathway, and that was encouraging that social inclusion and building some relationships. How do you feel that the coffee and chat group helped you specifically?
When you don't have a calendar and the day it's filling voids, it's you go and meet people that are they've got problems at home as well, and you probably can't relate to them in the first instance, because when you meet people out, sometimes you don't realise that anybody can have problems. But then when you are part of a coffee group over a few months, when trust starts to build, then people become more free with how they address each other, and what they're more comfortable with saying that I have mental health issues, and these are the problems I've had. And it seems strange that before I did that, is anybody who told me that, oh, we'll be able to look back on this and laugh at it, then that was like a really offensive thing to say. But we'll go into these groups and people who are like-minded and going through the same problems, is we did start to cheer each other up, and it then gave us a purpose to go there every week. And life became a little bit more relaxed and less tense.
That's a lovely way of putting it. So after that, and those kind of relationships that you started to build, and that confidence that grew, you accessed our allotment group, and that came just at a time when you completed a course of psychology as well. So thinking about that, how did that and your involvement in the allotment group help you?
Yeah, like you say, they came at the same time. I just done about 13 weeks in psychology. I won't say too much about that, but if I can analyse it in a short way, it enlightened a lot of things that went on previously in my life that you don't realise how big an impact they have if they're left unchecked. Like little seeds, like acorns, over the years, there's no room in your little skull for a giant oak tree. So that helped a great deal. But at the same time, going to the allotment group, there was people there that I realised had the same issues as I had, and some of them were further down the line on IPS. And so with me actually having the physical benefits of getting out and doing the gardening and having something to do and look forward to, well, I started building up a rapport with these people, and they were more like me, had very similar problems, it wasn't worrying then to listen to their problems. It was helpful, because these were people that came and they would cheer you up even though they were going through really bad things, because they knew that you could support each other, and by seeing those people further down the line, it's I think I've said this before, but when people have said before about there's always light at the end of the tunnel. To me, before I went there, the lights at the end of the tunnel were like the headlights of an oncoming locomotive. Everything looked dreadful, and there'd be a horrible outcome. But these people were really kind, and I still keep in touch with some of them. We go for coffee and we talk about our problems. So I've made a nice friendship out of it.
Tell me more about what life looks like now for you, having done all of that work and coming through all of that.
It's given me the confidence to be not just that was a stepping stone in those groups, and so the next phase was to engage with the public more. So I've been working in the British Heart Foundation on the tills and directly involved with customers. I've been doing that since November. I've go to walking football with men's health groups. I still meet a lot of people from the groups that I met before. We swap phone numbers, so that's the other thing is when you have close friends and family, it's easy to feel like a burden on them, and so you can quite easily lapse back into a cocoon state because you don't want to be that burden. And keeping in contact and making friendships with people who've been through similar instances and share the same thoughts it's a lot easier to discuss those problems with those. So sorry, am I wandering off the
No,
point?
you're doing really well. And you, well, absolutely, the relationships that you've built through it all, they've been really part of bringing you out, meaning that you're not isolated anymore. And you said about your volunteering, you're also engaging with IPS now, aren't you? Looking to go back to paid employment.
Yeah.
So that's part of what keeps you busy, and you've got loads of lovely activities that fill your diary, haven't you?
Yeah. Before it was like said earlier, it was a void, but now I meet people regularly, which it keeps my mind. What's the thing? The devil makes work for idle thumbs. Is now you've helped me fill all those gaps. And I'm just reflecting again what I said earlier about this is something I wouldn't have been able to do a long time ago. So I thank you for your help over the past few months and years.
You've done very well. Mate, you've done the work.
Gosh, that was absolutely brilliant. And Lee, I think we'd all want to say a huge thank you to you for being giving us the privilege of hearing your story and hearing from Victoria and Ruth about the work that they're obviously so proud to be leading on, for us as a board, for the wider public who listen in. It's just really important to bring to life what actually happens day to day in the work of a trust, and you've done that magnificently. So I hope you will be really proud of what you've done, because your story will touch others and it will be remembered. So thank you for that. I'm looking around the table to see if we've got any questions at all before we let you go and have a nice cup of tea or coffee and recover from the ordeal of having to face us. Steve, our Chief Exec.
Thank you, Chair. And Victoria, Ruth, thank you for showcasing PODS. I mean, it's a fantastic service. But Lee, I'm afraid I'm going to have to try and marginally embarrass you, because the team here will always talk about how good the service is, because it is. But actually, when somebody like your good selves comes along and makes it really real for us, then that kind of lands it differently. And I want to echo the Chair's thanks, really, in making it real. There are so many things that you've touched on there that most people that look into services like our adult locality teams or trusts in a whole tend not to see. Actually, they see a lot of the other stuff that we do, but none of the things that have made a big difference to you. And I think that's really important when we talk about what you just said there. Is it may be the small things, but those small things are everything when it comes to making the difference that you're talking about. And I also wish to sort of ask you a favour, if you don't mind. Your story and how you've managed that and how you're managing yourself through that and supporting others. I'd very much like for you to be able to share that wider, if that would be something you're comfortable with. All royalties will go to yourself, sir, of course, before you do anything on the graphic design side. But the point of the matter is that we have people like you that are able to inspire others. We try our best to do that as professionals, but actually somebody who's experienced, lived through that, supported themselves and grown as a result of that, the power that you bring is different to the power we can bring. So I want to say thank you and maybe ask you that small favour, if that would be something you'd be willing to share.
Yeah, no, and anything I can do to help, it would be payment back to express my gratitude on how much sometimes in your life you don't realise these things creep up on you, and it can happen to anyone, when you break an arm or a leg, people can see physical problems and say, sit down, take it easy. It's easy to discuss, but mental health issues unless you've been through it, it's very difficult to understand and to talk about. And I feel that over the past couple of years, I honestly don't know what I would have done without the support and the help. So I'm very appreciative, and I thank you all very much.
No, thank you, Lee. It's a very stalwart reminder that it doesn't matter what job we do, doesn't matter what walk of life we're from, we all encounter these issues, and every one of us around this table has been in the same space. And so as a result of that, I say thank you. I also say thank you for the fact that you're also clearly going to do that for free, which is always really nice. But I'm teasing you in the statement that you said it's payback. You don't owe us anything. It's our duty to support people like yourselves, because the payback to us is you being able to do what you've just done. And you should be really proud of that. Chris, our Associate Director of Comms, is on the call. So if you don't mind, we'll make contact and we'll help you share your story to inspire others.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lee.
Anybody else with any questions or observations? I think Lee, Victoria, Ruth brought great joy to us this morning, which is a wonderful way to start a board meeting. We'll say thank you so much and look forward to seeing you again. As I say, we are very proud of what you're doing, but most of all, you should be so proud of yourselves for what you're delivering. It's incredible. So thank you. Go and have a nice cup of tea now, and you can the tick in the box to say you've got over that particular hurdle of coming to speak to the board. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having us.
Thank you.
Fantastic. A great way to start the meeting. So we're going to crack on. We have a lot to cover as ever this morning. So in terms of apologies today, I've got apologies from Jackie McGecky and from Catherine Maxey. Jackie, one of our NEDs, Catherine, our interim Chief Medical Officer. Delighted to have Caroline Meisner-Stedman covering for her today. We've got Mark Balaam, who is one of our NEDs, who's joining us on screen today. Mark, great to have you with us. I have not been notified of any new declarations of interest, but has anybody discovered a new one since we last met? What was the most exciting point in the meeting for me? No. In which case, we'll go to the minutes of the last meeting held in public, which was on the 3rd of June. Rudolph, I know you've notified 1 or 2 changes to Martin in advance, so that's great.
Chair, I've had 2 from Mike Napton this morning, which are spelling corrections.
Perfect. All right. So we'll go to just for accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Mark?
These may have been picked up by others, but on page 11, 02617E, I'm not sure if it's operational risk register rather than operating risk register.
It should be operational risk register. You're quite right. Marvellous. Right, the back to page 12, 13, 14, and then 15. So with the amendments previously notified and the one that Mark has just raised, can we agree that they're an accurate record of the last meeting? Anything contained within them that doesn't come up otherwise in the rest of the meeting that anyone wants to pick up on? All right, in which case we will go to the action log where there are 2 open actions. One which appears to be perennially open is about access to ECT in the north of the county. Ollie, has there been any movement on this?
So we've had internal discussions and agreed that actually we need to pivot our approach to look at how we can ensure that patients in the south can access our provision in the north. And whilst we recognise that from a both sort of clinical and experience perspective, that isn't an ideal scenario, the most important thing is that we try and ensure that patients who require ECT have access. So we've got 2 meetings scheduled in the diary, one next week and one with the clinical effectiveness group to understand how we make that pathway work, how we ensure it's safe, And then we've got a separate conversation with CUH to address how for inpatients within CUH we would provide ECT, because whilst we did have an agreement with CUH, again, we've recognised that that isn't consistently applied. So we just want to make sure that that is in place. In terms of an ECT location in the south, we will continue to have that on our agenda in terms of sort of any estates developments and also as part of our estate strategy going forward.
I will say again, not I think that anybody nationally takes any notice, but it is important to say that ECT can be a life-saving treatment. And if this were a physical illness, to go back to Lee's point about if you've got a broken leg or a broken arm, it's very obvious, but serious mental illness can be a life-threatening condition, and ECT has proven to be an effective treatment for many. So we are talking about a really important service that should be available in the north and the south of the county, which we are struggling to get cooperation to achieve. And that is an enormous regret to me personally that we're not able to make progress on that, although I'm grateful for the work that's going on to try and at least improve access for all within the imperfect constraints that we have. Then I move to the second item, which is open, which is around the service visit process, which is something undertaken by executives, non-executives and governors. Martin, have we got any progress on the deep dive into that?
We're going to bring them back on the 2nd of September.
I'm asking about progress, not when it's coming back.
We've started some of the work, but I need to talk to the executive on this, so I will update you.
Okay. All right. Well, these are important data points for us. Just as hearing from Lee is an important point, hearing about the work that we do, the visits out to services, incredibly important also. All right, we can tend to move along. I haven't been notified of any other business. No. So I'll go to my report, which I will take as read. There's, by definition, when a report is written, the world tends to move on a little bit quite quickly in advance of the report being published. And so, therefore, today I will stick to just a few welcomes and noting things. So today we welcome Yvette Cooper as Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. We wish her well in what is a difficult job. She will be the 7th Secretary of State since 2021. We hope that her tenure is long and impactful. We, I think, would also want to publicly welcome the emphasis being given to adult social care by the Prime Minister, who has said that this is one of the areas that he wants to have an impact on. This clearly has been an area that's been much discussed and much investigated over decades now in this country. We have to believe that you get better care and better return on investment if you can keep people out of acute hospitals, which is part of the work that we do. And so some redirection of resources towards adult social care would, I think, undoubtedly prove to be good in terms of access to care, the quality of care, and the economics of health and care. So we would very much hope to see some progress on that. We note that the Care Quality Commission, who regulate our services, they have a new chair and chief executive who are just coming in. We again welcome them into their roles and look forward to continuing to work productively with the CQC. Some of you will note with more interest than others that there's a process of local government reorganisation going on. We were at one point imminently expecting an announcement for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and then that moved, as trains tend to, from being about to arrive to being delayed. So we are still in the delayed status. Now, local government reorganisation is, you might think, not health but so many of our services are intertwined with local authorities and with the communities that they serve. Anything that acts as a delay or a destabilizer for local government inevitably impacts on our services. And so we do hope that we move from a delayed status to a decision status quickly, in order that the officers in the government can move along and we can begin the process of understanding who we're interacting with and engaging with in those new entities that emerge. And finally, what I'd like to do is to thank our staff. They have been working absolutely valiantly through a period of extreme heat, which I know everybody has done, but if you are in an inpatient setting in particular, you will recognise that these are quite challenging environments to be in. But they're also working through absolutely every area that we touch to think about how we can become a more efficient organisation and a more effective organisation. And we can only do that through the goodwill and engagement of our staff. So I want to say again, publicly, thank you so much to all of those for what you're doing and for the spirit in which you're trying to support us to be just the better organisation that we absolutely aspire to be. So I think enough from me. I'm going to move then to invite Steve to give his Chief Executive's update.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. No, good morning. Blimey, I'm living in the future, which will be a nice place to live, actually. The past is often a determinant. So nice to see you all. Good morning, everybody. And a quick welcome, actually, to those online. For those online that you can't see, we've got two other guests with us in the room, so welcome to your good self. So Tom from the Guardian Company, hello, and Michael from Synopsis, hello, welcome to the board. And thank you for your convenience of squishing you up a corner, because, yeah, no problem at all. So nice to have you with us. Quick overview of my report for this month. There is a lot going on, and so you'll see that the report is probably a little more in depth this month to try and capture some of the key elements of things that are happening at a national level, things that are happening at a regional and then a local level, and then a bit closer to home inside the organisation. So a couple of areas that I'll touch on in a second that I'll ask my exec colleagues to expand on a little bit later in their own reports. I think it's probably worthy of note to say, as the chair, is to echo the welcome to the new Prime Minister and the new Secretary of State for Health, both of which are committed to the delivery and the continued delivery of the NHS 10-year plan, which is a welcome sight. The three key indicators within there is hospital to community, prevention to treatment, and analogue to digital. And I've simplified that, but they are the three core themes of which Mr. Burnham and Ms. Cooper have already made declarations that they wish to continue that. There's a particular focus, however, coming out of the new parliamentary team and new policy team around the emphasis, particularly around digital, as being a significant enabler across a health service, which I think is very wise. And it is also really important to say that digital is not just an electronic patient record or an ambient voice technology, which is obsessing the NHS at the moment. It is much wider than that. So it is something that we need to consider as we move forward. Just touching on a couple of other areas of significant note. One in particular is you'll be very cognizant of some of the policy updates that have come out and lessons learned from some of the key inquiries, which are sad to read, sobering to review, but there are lessons in there that we need to take very seriously. And I think the key indicators associated with that, particularly whether they are within our mental health sphere or our community or physical health sphere or not, it is irrelevant. Those lessons are generic, and therefore we take them very seriously. And I'm really pleased to see that we pick up on those through our quality reviews. We unpack those collectively as a trust, and we ask ourselves the question and hold the mirror up to ourselves in that response. So the Ockenden review is the key one that has recently come out, which contains a significant amount of areas of improvement needed across maternity services, but there are generic lessons in there that would apply to any provider, and hearts and prayers go to families involved that are dealing with the consequences of that and anything else of that ilk. There will be similar reviews that will continue to come out, sadly, in the NHS, However, we will constantly be on top of those, review those, and we will hold that mirror up to ourselves. And we have a range of mechanisms to do so, some of which don't get light at the board, such as our SWOT rounds, such as our OD processes, our CPD areas, and lessons learned, and thematic reviews. But we pick all of those up, looking at Dr. Napton through the Quality and Safety Committee, which is great to hear. Moving swiftly on, the Trust Strategy Update under 2.6 of my report. Really pleased now that that's now embedded. For those colleagues that are dialed in or new to the board, this is a trio of strategies. This isn't just the, I'll say the usual. I've probably just disrespected the entire NHS by saying that. This isn't the usual approach, particularly for us. We have devised a health inequality strategy touching on the big areas of our population demography, population spend, and our areas of inequity. We've then developed a clinical strategy talking about the future of healthcare, particularly in our community physical care and mental health space, and we've used those to inform a trust strategy. All of that is then embedded in our social value, our anchor institute status, and that will be the predeterminant to moving through our well-led infrastructure when the CQC come in to review us again, and the start of our process around advanced foundation trust status. I'm really pleased with those three because they link together beautifully. They have been recognised by a range of partners as being really good practice. So I'm really proud of the organisation being able to do that because it's been built on insight and co-production all the way through. So more of that to come. I touched on the CQC well-led programme, and it is coming very quickly to a point where we won't go into the detail at this point, but my report touches on the areas of learning from the CQC report. And I have this week received the annual review of all of those activities against our key areas of improvement that we've made and continuing to make, which is really pleasing. And Rachel is leading on that for us, our chief nurse. And they would also include some of the compliance areas that we're not happy with that we wish to address. And so all of that will come to a future board to talk about where we're at and before we invite the CQC back in. And I'm also pleased to say that given the new leadership arrangements in the CQC, our relationship with the CQC is really positive, really open. They've praised us for our transparency, our objectivity, and really quite bluntly our candour. And so where we have areas that we feel that we can improve, we own those. We haven't been defensive. We haven't pushed back in that respect. However, where there are areas that we disagree with them because that's the right thing to do. And so I'm really pleased with that relationship and want to thank Rachel and particularly Jim Ledbetter for supporting that relationship, as well as Chris, who's in that team that does a lot of the quality work. One area, Chair, I want to just focus on, and then I'll draw the rest of the report to a close, is a very significant report that was released a little time ago by Lord Mann. So Lord Mann released a report talking about areas of institutional and directed challenge towards racism within the NHS, something that we take incredibly seriously as a trust, as do all of our protected characteristic areas. And this is a really important thing for us to say. I'm really pleased that we have progress within our PCREF agenda, where I'm really pleased that we have progress around our cultural agenda. It is a forever journey, I'm afraid. And therefore, as an organisation, as we move through this, I am really seeing a lot of improvement. And actually not just from a policy point of view, but by going to talk to staff, going to engage with some of our staff that are very willing to talk about their experiences prior and post conversations with them. And I'm really pleased to see a lot of improvement in that space, but it is a forever one, this one, I'm afraid, and therefore we'll keep that on our agenda. But our thanks to Lord Mann and the recommendations of which we completely accept as an organisation and note that for the record. I won't touch on the rest of the report, Chair, with a couple of highlights. I will, however, touch on the National Independent Review into Mental Health Conditions, ADHD and Autism. I am not satisfied, neither are the executive, in terms of some of the long waits that we are experiencing, particularly in our children and young people area. And the Chief Operating Officer and I have spoken about that this morning. Holly and I have talked about that with some additional remedial action. However, this is a national issue that we are battling with increases of demand, with a lack of capacity. That does not mean, though, that is an excuse for us to tackle some of these issues. And it's something that we take very seriously, which we'll pick up at a later date. I think the couple of areas that I will just touch on that are very positive. One in particular is our employment recognition scheme with regards to the Silver Award that we've been received from supporting veterans. and employment. And a significant thank you, I'd like to go on minutes, Martin, to Major Retired Tom Bale, who has led this work for us as the Veterans Lead, who has passionately led this both by professional standards and his own personal commitment. So the staff network in this has done a remarkable job under Tom's leadership, and I think we owe Tom from the board a duty of thanks. Final thing, a bit of a shout out to my colleagues in Wisbech, who were very kind and entertained me when I went slightly feral and turned up slightly unannounced. And it was great to spend time with them in their MIU. Some of the stuff that they see is anything and everything. Some of the way that they operate and their agility professionally and clinically is outstanding. And I'll be getting round to our other physical care units. So watch out if you're listening to this, because I'll be turning up for a cup of coffee and see how you're doing. But what a brilliant team. And great to see them all operating at their very best, including a dog club that I'm now a member of. So any of you that are feline fans, I do apologise, but they were very much dog people, and which did get drawn into my conversation about the hound. So I'll leave it there, Chair, with a big thank you, as you said, to our staff.
Brilliant. Rudolph.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight CPFT's contribution to this national review on prevalence of mental health conditions and ADHD, and so on to a number of CPFT staff, which particularly animal in terms of for trainees on on board as well. So we've had a hand in this as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Rudolph. Any other questions at all? Okay, I'm going to propose then, Steve, that we stay with you, but we move to your risk management update.
Thank you, Chair. The risk management paper I'll take as read. We did take Martin and I, big thank you, Martin, to yourself for supporting the delivery of this. We took the opportunity to do two things. One, to assess this against the Insightful Board programme. Secondly, to look at this with regards to the new Advanced Foundation Trust framework that will be applied around BAF, Board Assurance Framework, and the OR, which is, Mark well spotted, the operational risk register. I did have to check in the paper, Mark, that I got it right again, so thank you for that. So a quick overview of the differentials between what is the operational risk register and the BAF. That's there for commentary. And then likewise, Martin, I think we collectively as an executive have done a clean up against this, hence Appendix 1, which is the highlight of the Board Assurance Framework. Just to remind colleagues that are looking at this from a colour perspective, it is not usual to have BAF risks that are green on the basis that they are strategic. So please don't get suddenly anxious that they're red and amber. It is not usual to see green, because if they were green, there wouldn't be risks. So I'll just hold that thought and keep those as strategic risks, which we will continue to update. And then, Martin, I think there is a risk review policy that's coming back to the board at a future board meeting with a review of all of the policies that sit underneath that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's already been taught in the church from the initial look, but we've got some very helpful feedback from the chair, and that's now going to go back through the cycle of stages 1, 2, and 3 of policy review.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, any questions? Oh, Mark, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. It was just a suggestion to make the Appendix 1 less red and orange, is you could have a third column to say at target or not at target. And if you're at target, you're not anticipating to do much more work. So you could have, say, a green to say we've reached target, and that's positive. And you only have then say a red or an amber if you're above target. And that way, at least it just because we're having C red and orange does look problematic when it's not necessarily the case, because some things are always going to be higher risk.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. As Chief Exec, you often describe these things as something called a tartan rug. And so what you tend to do is you look at all the reds and the ambers, you don't look at the greens. So but that's a good thought, Martin.
That's already built into the template. I've just, at the moment, that should be white, so I've taken it out for this version.
Fantastic, thank you, Mark.
A question I sort of raised previously, but it's probably just me and my failure of understanding the second of the risks on effective patient care. There's quite a lot in there, and I wasn't entirely sure what that risk was describing for me. Carolyn.
I'm very happy to reword it for clarity, just to explain from my perspective what this means. While our teams have really good knowledge of their own patients and what they're working with, because we're not yet fully rolled out on our reporting of outcomes in the way that we would like to be, we don't have the overview in the same way where we can compare teams. And I think it's that risk that then we're not necessarily having the information we would want to have in front of us.
And I think
I'm happy to.
I'm probably not the only one who will struggle to quite understand what it is telling us to understand as a risk.
Yeah. Happy to go and rephrase that a bit to make that clearer.
That'd be super helpful.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions on the risk update? Lots of risk in there, clearly, but we're in health, which I suppose would not be unusual. Some of the risks we will touch on, particularly those relating to resources as we move through the meeting. Okay, I'm going to propose then that we move along, and I am looking at you, Mike, for an update from the Quality, Safety and Patient Experience Subcommittee, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is a report relating to the Quality, Safety and Patient Experience Committee on the 22nd of July.
June, I hope.
June, was it? July, 22nd of July.
June.
Oh, so there's a typographical error in the report. I apologise. It's not a very good start. But anyway, I draw out a few points, if I may. You've already mentioned ECT, Chair, with regards to lack of access in the south of the county. It's not mentioned in the report, but I don't want to lose the issue of lack of paediatric, female psychiatric intensive care beds in this county, which means these women have to be sent out of areas, and that has profound impacts on the quality of care and the outcomes, and some of those outcomes are very adverse. So the next point is around complaints. We remain interested in complaints and making sure that we achieve our target response time of 60 days. The average in May of this year was 59 days. But I think Rachel, Chief Nurse, you might expand on that point. So it remains a challenge for us in terms of responding to patients who are making complaints about our services. And I think the important thing to say there is that we want to respond in a timely manner, but also learn from what went wrong from those patients. There's also a cluster of things that we've been interested in at the Quality Committee around restrictive practice, particularly debriefs after rapid sedation and monitoring in that regard, debriefs after restrictive interventions and training. And I'm looking forward to Mike Seaman coming back to the next committee to look at those in the round. So rather than taking them as separate items, they are related and they are managed through a subgroup of our committee, which is called the Violence, Aggression and Restrictive Practice Group. I think this also speaks to the challenges that our patients and staff face in our inpatient wards. We've mentioned the Patient Equality, Race Equality Framework, Patient Carer Race Equality Framework, the PCREF, and the data there is in the pack. Two things. One is, as a focus this year, improving the data. We can't address issues regarding to race for patients and carers unless we have the data. So that's one of the focuses. But the other is through Anna Took, who's working very hard, particularly through the Carers Board, to actually listen to what patients and carers say. The next one is IPQR. There's a very good section in there on outcomes. So as a committee, we're very interested in moving our sight on not just our performance and timely interventions, but the outcomes that we're achieving with the treatment. And I think you've mentioned that with regards to the risk question earlier on. There's a very good paper as well, which reviews our patient safety incident response framework. This is a relatively new framework. It came in 2 or 3 years ago, and it gives you some details as to what we do with serious patient safety incidents and how we investigate those. We use the national prescribed criteria and also have the freedom to use local criteria to investigate patient safety incidents, PSERF, and I would draw out that one of the areas that I think we do well on in that regard is engagement with patients and families when a serious incident occurs. But there's also a useful page there on the learning response tools that we use once we've done an investigation to learn from it and learn from it across the organisation. In terms of compliance, we've already talked about the well-led review. Thank you. So I won't dwell on that. But we also receive internal assurance from the quality assurance visits that go on in this organisation. So the CQC is an external regulator, if you like. We do our own QA, quality assurance visits, and we're going to increase the granularity of the reporting of those to our committee going forward. And we're also going to include quality impact and air quality impact assessments reported in that report, with thanks to Rachel and Jim Ledbetter. Some highlights though. Annabelle Price, Dr. Annabelle Price has reported on the first year's work of the clinical ethics group, which is proving to be a very effective place to discuss the ethical implications and insights from the work that we do in whatever way we do it. So whether it's resource allocation, the use of oxygen and other topics, and she's receiving requests to look at specific topics which would benefit from an ethical perspective. We also received the Community Mental Health Survey, which I think should be given parity of esteem really to our staff survey. And I will express my thanks to Jonathan Wells, who's been a long-standing supporter, particularly through the Carer Board, who's stepping down from his role at Rethink. So I think it'd be good to note his amazing contribution. 20 years ago, when I was working in the PC, he was around then. So he's a voice of continuity as well as a voice of wisdom. And lastly, we approved the Medicines Optimisation Pharmacy Strategic Plan, which I'm pleased to say is aligned to the CPFT clinical strategy. So it's an example of where the strategy is informing the wider work. I think that's probably it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. Steve.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. A couple of one question, I think, and maybe one suggestion. On the policies, page 48, we review across the organisation audit and assurance policies, and I think we know there are a number outstanding, and there are some within quality and safety committee. And we know how important policies are to underpinning the efficiencies that we want to make financially. So I noted in the report that there is a targeted programme of work underway to address the policies. It would be yourself, Michael, perhaps executive to perhaps update on the timeline for that. And the second suggestion is on the patient safety incident response plan, and it doesn't say need a response today, but on page 55, generally incidents I think have reduced between 24 and 25 between those years. But there's one category or one incident category that's increased, which is service user issues, up to 19% from 16, which is obviously 1 in 5 of the incidents. It's a fairly, for me, feels like a fairly generic sort of catch-all. It probably isn't, but a suggestion is, as there are quite a few in that category, whether it's worth delving a bit deeper and breaking it down to pull out those that are perhaps more significant for greater attention. But that's a suggestion, perhaps to be taken away. But just those 2 comments. Thank you, Chair.
Let's come back on that, Mike.
Yes, so you're quite right. There are a significant number of policies and SOPs and other things which are not being reviewed in a timely way. And there's quite a large number that haven't been reviewed in a timely way. So what we heard at the last Quality and Safety and Patient Experience Committee was that a targeted programme of work is underway to address this, including a comprehensive review of all outstanding policies with named executive leads and looking at whether the policies need to be updated or retired or merged with other policies. So there's a range of things to do in order to address this. In terms of the timeline, I don't have an answer to that question, other than it's probably months rather than weeks in order to get an answer. But it's absolutely clear that having up-to-date policies are crucial to ensuring we have safe and effective services. So this is not something we take lightly. It drives clinical practice and it drives safe practice. So we'll keep that under regular review. But the answer to the specific question of what the timeline is, I don't have that.
Well, hopefully somebody does, because policies and their timeliness has been an issue here for a while. So anybody want to tell me when we are going to get fully compliant?
I can inform in terms of, so each executive have their own respective policies and processes. Martin has been looking to coordinate that. We do now have a weekly separate looking at ones that are out of date or coming up to out of date. I think it would be very appropriate for us to bring per committee the timeline for each of those to be achieved.
I still don't have a timeline, but Steve?
So I think that there are a couple of things here. One is we'll bring that back as Rachel describes it. That's really, really positive suggestion. I think the second is, Mike, the point that you made around it can be months, not weeks, forgive me. This isn't a challenge to you, Mike. It's the fact that some of these policies and procedures are legacy to a point where they've been superseded. So there's a bit of housekeeping. So the housekeeping is weeks, as in that can be done within the next couple of weeks, where policies need to be reviewed against new national guidance, new NICE guidance, etc. That takes a while because it needs to be embedded. So I think we will produce a update against each committee, Martin, that will then collate that into a single report. And then I think one of the things that we'll do is separate the two, Steve, in terms of what is housekeeping that needs to be just retired, out of date, don't need it anymore. And we just need to check that before we switch something off, we haven't switched it off inappropriately without causality. And I think that's really important. So what feels like a really simple thing to do is in our governance mechanism. So it's not quite as straightforward. So I think there's that we can bring that back, and we'll bring that back, take that as an action to take it to the next public board, because it'll be picked up here, Martin, but I think we'll bring it back in terms of a compliance point in our next confidential board. That will give a timeline for us.
Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, no, just to say that, to give you an idea of the numbers, there's 24 policies for quality and safety, 5 for people and culture, and 4 for business and performance, which were overdue at the end of June. There are a couple which dates back, I think, one to like 2022. So again, it could be something which does need retiring. And I fully agree with Steve that if you don't need a policy, you should get rid of it. One thing which you could look at over time is, do you combine certain policies? Because if you reduce the number, then actually updating them becomes easier because you've got less policies to update, though some of them may then be longer. So I think it's something which needs to be done, because we've been hovering around the 80% compliant level on policies for quite a while. So we need to do something different, because what's been done in the past hasn't solved the problem. So hopefully these current initiatives will lead to a number. It's not saying we'll be 100%, but I think we'll all be more comfortable when we're in the 90s, and having that there's just a certain number which may happen to go over date versus long overdue policies.
Karen.
I think my question is around risk, because we've had a conversation about which are out of date, what's the process for updating them and reviewing them. My question is, where is the risk in terms of the application and use of those policies on a day-to-day basis? And are we exposing ourselves to risk by having out-of-date policies that staff on a day-to-day basis refer to, or not, as the case may be?
They're spread across executives.
I'm happy to answer that. I think the short answer to that is the reason for the weekly SIPRA So the weekly sit rep is going through one of those areas that determines whether it's a clinical risk or a procedural risk, and then anything that presents itself as that to be prioritised. So I think as the moment is that, let me just be really blunt. Thank you, Mark. I'm aware of the numbers in terms of where this is sitting, and thank you for your suggestion. One of the things that we need to think about here is just because a policy out of date doesn't mean it isn't applicable. And therefore, the fact that it is just a review of the policy, if it is still sound, it is still within the NICE guidance and it's still within the governance arrangements, then there arguably should be a better housekeeping of tidying up the date of its review, but it's still in date, as in it's still live and it's still appropriate. So I think that's being reviewed on a weekly basis. I think this bit of housekeeping, though, is a really good indicator of the fact that that's one of those loose ends that we need to tidy up with our CQC recommendations, and something that I think we need to take very, very seriously. Hence, we'll loop it back. It's a good point, then.
All right. I'm going to propose we move on. Rachel, I think we stay in the quality area. We go to you.
Yes, I'll just pick up on Steve's point about piece of we'll look into the service user issues and come back. Thank you, Chair. Take the report as read. There are a number of areas that I would like to raise that Mike has touched on already. The first one being in terms of debriefs to, which is an alert to the board. This has been a piece of work that's taken place within, particularly out of the Specialist Directorate for some time. A deep dive happened a few months ago. And within that, the clinicians typically record on System 1 shortly after an incident. However, very rarely would the patient at that point be able to have a debrief, and hence there's a potential issue there in recording.
Rachel, could you just speak up a bit with the camera? You're not projecting quite loud enough for the camera to be on use.
Okay, that's the first time ever for me. But so I'll say it again. So in terms of when an incident happens, the clinicians typically record on System 1 shortly after an incident, but very rarely at that point would the patient be able to have a debrief, hence the potential in recording deviation at that point. Our Chief Nursing Information Officer has been working in close collaboration with the Directorate and has been reviewing the recording standards to improve compliance. This is also being monitored in our violence and aggression reduction group. They are looking at a tech solution, I'm assured of, and we're going to continue to monitor this through the performance risk executive. The other area that I'd like to raise is in terms of the sexual safety training compliance. Whilst additional training is scheduled for July and August, we have seen an increase in reporting. That's a good thing because it means that the previous training in terms of awareness is actually making that difference for staff in terms of the recognition. The category, what we have also done, the categories have also been expanded, which I think, Steve, goes back to your point about what are the categories for service user. We need to be very clear what those categories are. So we have more categories now in terms of sexual safety incidents, including sexual disinhibition, affectionate activity. And so this broadening of categories is helping staff identify the appropriate category rather than being all collated into one. To of note, there are several incidents relating to sexual disinhibition for some patients when they are unwell. And we are reviewing the last 12 months data to see what could be, what is the new normal in terms of that comparison. The third area that I'd like to raise is also that we have an increase in pressure ulcers within our community teams. We do need to recognise that this is an increasingly frail group of patients. Deteriorating wounds are often can be due to wound healing, and also some variable adherence to pressure relieving equipment in patients' homes. That's part and parcel. I think there is an opportunity here for us to delineate between the development of a pressure ulcer and deterioration of a pressure ulcer. And what we are also doing is doing a comparison between well, that there's a deep dive happening into one of the Cambridge district nursing teams, and we're comparing that with the Peterborough deep dive that took place last year to analyse any additional similar trends or themes. And lastly, just in terms of the complaints, as Mike has said, we are currently reporting it at 30 to 50 days. We have moved to 60 days from June. This will be in the next report. We talked previously about the increase in numbers of complaints and how that's monitored. What I would like to do is, and everybody be aware, we have a quality improvement review happening into complaints at the moment. I'll take the results of that back through the next Quality and Safety Committee, Patient Experience Committee, mid-August. And we are also having our internal audit are also doing a review of our complaints. Two other areas that I'd just like to follow on from what Steve said, and yes, again, thank you to Jim for the well-led summary, and this will come through to public board. Including in that will be the reshaping of our quality improvement within the trust, which is really, there's a large amount of work taking place over the past, well, since the well-led review. In fact, Jim Ledbetter and Michelle Barnes attended Toyota a couple of weeks ago, and there's some fantastic learning from that, which will be coming back through the trust in due course. And just one other area, Steve referred to our relationship and engagement meetings with the Care Quality Commission. Sorry, to the CQC Care Quality Commission. I absolutely echo Steve's view in terms of our good relationships in the mental health sector. We are now meeting, CQC have realigned themselves to physical health sector, mental health sector. Jim and I are meeting with our physical health sector colleagues in the next 3 weeks as well. It's unfortunate they don't come together and we can do it all in one, but I think in some ways that would be, that we can foster those relationships as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rachel. Questions? I guess we'll read off and then Steve.
Thank you very much. It's good to hear about the work on the post tranquilization monitoring as well. But I just also wanted to ask about the feedback side of things. And I guess there are these quite stark differences between in the inpatient domain in particular, between people rating us good or very good across the 3 directorates. And the most obvious explanation that occurred to me was is that because a much higher fraction of our patients are detained in the children's and adults directorate. And so I wondered what the expectation is, that because presumably there is some expectation that if you've been detained, you are less happy about that anyway. Do we address that in any way of looking at, for example, the fraction of the detained? Obviously, we want to be good, but it's a consideration.
I think we should have a look. More details,
Agree that it's a really interesting question to explore more, but and we also, you know, we're very keen to be providing care which even our detained patients and even our most unwell patients recognise as good eventually, you know, even if to the point of admission. And in fact, they're sort of some of our most vulnerable patients, aren't they? But we can have a look and see if there's a way of pulling out more of the quality of that as well, and what the nature of the concerns are, because I think that would answer some of that.
Steve, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, please. I think it's just on the point that, Mike, you raised in terms of the focus of the committee in relation to complaints. Complaints are a source of insight, which is, obviously they're a source of concern for the person raising the complaint. And they're also a source of learning and insight for us to take into account what we find when we go through that process. I also want to say, however, every complaint that we receive, we take very seriously, but we're finding that there are a significant number of complaints that are in a detail that we're not used to, and that's a national thing because of people using AI to support assisted complaints, etc. Some of those also relate across into SARS, or freedom to speak up, or access to records. There's a lot of information being borne out of providers at the moment. To give some numbers to colleagues, and this is our numbers, this isn't national, 23-24, we saw a 63% increase in complaint activity. 24-25, we then saw a 27% increase on top of the 63%. And in 25-26, we saw a 45% increase on top of the 27, on top of the 63. Doesn't take much to add that up to work out 135% increase over a 3-year period. Not a lot of that is directly attributable to the quality of the care that we're providing. It is down to information seeking clarification. That, against a team that is significantly fixed in terms of its capacity, means that the standards are not where we want them to be, but they're explainable, but they're not defendable in terms of the fact that we need to keep up with this. So one of the things that Rachel has agreed is that we will look at a contextual paper to dispel any myths associated with this, to get the details, the pure activity numbers and the capacity numbers, to take it, Mike, through your committee, to then start to look at what the resolution is, not just to fix our current compliance issues, but to forecast what this projection looks like. But the projection is not, it doesn't look good. And this is against all of those areas of FOI, SARS, anything to do with complaints. And so it is something that we need to take seriously. And maybe we indeed also need to embrace some of the NHS steps into looking at digital solutions to keep up with the digital requirements, which is a bit odd in this request. But we're seeing that across the board. Some real numbers here, which are really important. Sorry, Rachel.
No. Thank you, Steve. You've absolutely, in terms of the context of that, the quality improvement review that's taken place is exactly that, which will be going back through the Quality and Safety Patient Experience Committee. I think what I would want us to, and whilst absolutely agree, the complaints, the PALs and complaints team, do a fantastic job, but yes, you're absolutely right, they're very fixed in terms of their capacity, and at times it's been is challenged, but it's also the impact on our clinical directorates, because they are the teams that are very often investigating the complaints as part of their, it's part of everybody's role. But when we know the pressures that we've got in our clinical services already, that's, it can compound.
Yeah, thank you. But something we'll bring through to the committee.
Mike.
So, yes, thank you for that. Discussion on complaints and opening it up. The only observation I would make is linking back to the Ockenden report. Mm-hmm. And they only discovered the poor practice in Nottingham following 2 mothers who complained. Yes. And therefore, the timeliness of the complaint is important, but there are other factors that are equally important in terms of hearing what people say, rather than responding, as well as responding to them in a timely way. Because that is one of our ways of spotting areas where practice is not as good as we would wish it to be, and therefore we can have an early warning sign and act upon it. So thank you for your comments, and take it absolutely seriously, but it's not just about how quickly we respond, it's about what people say.
And sorry, Chair, can I just say, Mike, thank you for saying that, because these things can be seen as transactional targets, and they're not. They are insights, they're learning, and I think Rachel's point of this is that if we take these as seriously as we should, which we do, then they require a significant amount of others around the table to get involved to look at these. We spot trends, we do trend analyses, we do all of those things. So I think this will be a really good debate, Mike, if you don't mind leading out on through the, I mean, we need to kick the tires on it, but we need to also be fit for the future with this stuff too. Thank you.
I think just a point of clarity, Chair, if I may, because on the exec summary, it says complaint volumes have continued to reduce. Don't know if that's a typing error.
Can you just check it then?
Yeah.
The other thing I'm curious about is how our target, which we've changed, interacts with the National Oversight Framework target on complaints, because we don't seem to be marrying to that any longer.
Why?
So complaints isn't part, so patient experience is part of our National Oversight Framework, and you could argue that complaints obviously is an indication of our patient experience.
I think there is a not target commonly in complaints.
We haven't.
I haven't seen it.
All right. Well, I think it's worth keeping an eye on.
Yes, it is.
Do you know what it's for?
No, it's kind of, you're absolutely right. It's part of the national quality strategy. There's been the discussions as part of that.
I think it will be lower than we are operating at.
It's
I
not
think
live
you
yet,
might
though,
say
is it?
that.
I believe.
No, it's not. I think we need to just be.
We need to get ahead of that.
Thank you. All right. All done? Okay, in which case, Robert, we move to your finance report.
Thank you. So you have obviously the monthly first quarter position. We had a deficit plan of just over £3 million, and we broadly came in at 3.2 million for the year-to-date position. So we're in just under £20,000. In terms of how that's performing within the organisation, the clinical departments are actually working, directorates have worked within their budget. We spend 75% of our funding or our budget is against the clinical departments. The other 15% is within my directorate, which is principally estates facilities and business technology, all the hardware, software, etc. That's 90% of our spend. And again, broadly, slightly over in terms of the estate spend at the minute, particularly I think due to the age and condition of our estate and making sure we're doing our repairs and maintenance. But at this stage, no major challenge in terms of the history. Clearly moving forward, we've got a number of things that are going on. We are addressing some historical contract issues. So you'll see in the paper, we have our biggest outstanding is with Cambridge University Hospitals. We've actually got a payment on accounts this month from them. So my operational director of finance is meeting with them every week to go through very long-standing, very complex, multiple service contracts to see if we can get those ones settled. And we've got a similar challenge around, we have a difference between ourselves and the ICB that myself and Steve have been in discussions in relation to, and that will likely have an impact going forward, but I will address that through the Business Performance Committee next month. So year to date, on the face of it, that's a reasonable position. Moving forward, it becomes more challenging. We are seeing improvements in terms of the grip and control and some of the, what I call that. So that's basically your very good business management of raising purchase orders, challenging commitments, non-pay panels at every level, including with the executive team each week. And the same for non-pay, which I think we've been reviewing that, particularly with Karen coming in and support from execs, Holly in particular. So there's some positives there, challenges, what we're doing going forward and making sure that we can take out those resources that we can take out and best align ourselves so that we're working in the best possible processes, and that's what's key for us going forward. You can see some minor changes it's not on here, so I will be updating the finance report to also so help us give some comparisons to last year, just so we can actually see whether our KPI improvements. So I'll give an example. It's not a significant change at the minute, but in terms of our better payment practice compliance, our volume of payments is actually up a couple of basis points, and the same for our value of payments compared to where we were at the end of last year. Okay, that's only 3% in terms of the volume, but it's not 5% in terms of people being paid better. So again, it's all these little things that add up. This is how we're improving and going in the right direction. In terms of our capital spend, capital, to be honest, the variance is a noise in the year to date, in the sense that you always have projects from last year that roll over. They're now being paid, so we're arguably slightly above the amount of money we would have expected to pay this year. But again, we'll manage that through to the end of the year. Okay, so that's just a timing issue. And as I said, this is always going to be a challenge in a currently deficit organisation, but we are driving down our debtors, and as I said, had a significant payment on accounts this month. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Robert. Really good to get the report, and clearly I suspect people will want to explore as we go through the meeting the level of congruence that exists between your report and some of the other reports that are coming through on efficiencies and effectiveness, if you like. Steve, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Robert. Just on the efficiency, so year to date, it's good to see the progress to by the end of month 3 beyond target, but I think if you sort of alluded to the challenges lay ahead. So it was a question just to get your sense on how that is progressing for the rest of the year, but particularly how we're engaging with managers and teams in the process, and also how we're getting on with the QIA elements of that, which we know is really important.
Yeah, I think the critical thing is the level of engagement we're getting, particularly through the transformation programme and the engineering next door across the organisation has really been ramping up, and I think engaging. And I think people are actually, we've now with as we will see this afternoon in the board development session, there's a lot of more clarity around structure of delivery at every single level, with I think very clear work programmes and work breakdown structures with clear KPIs. And I think that's something that we've not had that level of clarity of what's required in terms of really good business process management to deliver better patient care at every level. And we know this month, for example, that we have from July the 15th, our shift pattern rotas for the wards. And I think that will have, with the training that we've been given to ward managers as well as the matrons, a real difference in actually how we use both to fill gaps and holidays by actually making sure we've got compliance against our updated policies so that they can deliver better. So it's still going to be a challenge. It's a big number to deliver this year, around at least 20 million variance between our income and expenditure that we need to find every way we can to reduce. But I think we'll start to see that on that we'll continue to move in the right direction. Challenge will be, is that fast enough? Can we address all the historic issues at the same time? That will be the challenge, and we will keep it on review and make sure we're picking up on that, but also highlighting when we do have issues that have emanated and what else we might be able to do.
I just remind everyone who's speaking in this room to project as far as you can so that actually the microphone is picking you up. I'm going to go to Mark and then to you, Holly.
Hey, Robert, looking at the efficiency summary, there's been a lot of movement between pay and non-pay. So now it's kind of like reversed. Originally it was going to be 13 pay, 5 or 6 non-pay. Now it's 8 pay and 12. Again, this is a forecast. When would you anticipate changing the forecast? Because at the moment the forecast is just saying what we are planning to do versus this is now what we believe is a realistic achievement of kind of the efficiencies for the year. What time of the year would you think that would then start to potentially change? Hopefully we can deliver it all, but when would you think that would kind of occur? How far into the year for that to really be considered?
Over the next 3 months, we will start to see the effectiveness of what we're doing.
Okay.
Now, really putting the transformation plans into the delivery phase.
Okay. And the second question was the WTE numbers. There seems to be a difference between the numbers in the finance report and the workforce scorecard in the HR documents. Not a huge number, but again, the difference of between like 30 kind of also kind of people. Again, I wasn't too sure whether because it was a slightly different date in June and May when the numbers are taken. But again, it was just more, which ones would be the right numbers.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think there's a real challenge around actually when and how we're capturing either whole time equivalent or whole time equivalent paid and whole time and equivalent contracted. So there's a bit of methodology I think we need to work through to clarify for us all. So I will work on Karen on doing that. And I'll give you another reason for that. Within the finance report, you would see, for example, that bank nursing has increased in June compared to May. But actually, if you look at the costs that we've applied for that, the cost per whole time equivalent is substantially lower. So there's a challenge there in are we capturing the right, we'll capture the money right, but I think in the finance report, because this is done earlier, probably the whole time equivalent are more of a calculation as opposed to what's gone through the payroll. So we have the pay right, but not necessarily the whole time equivalence contracted, because you'll have bank and you'll have agency, and somebody has to go through the various invoices or whatever to actually align that to a whole-time equivalent. So I think we've got some challenges there. The money's right.
Thanks. Thanks.
I think you know that since I've come in, I've always said that's one of our areas that we need to really be clearer on, particularly in the business performance committee, because I do feel the resources that we look after drive the money, and we need to make sure we're understanding those resources. With respect to the people in culture committee, that's more about OD development policies. But I'll pass over to Karen.
And to support what Robert said there, we do know we need to do some alignment and cleaning up exercises, Mark, which is entirely appropriate that we would do that during the year in any event. And certainly my team and Robert's team are working literally hand in glove to make sure that we've got confidence in understanding pay in the context of finance budget and pay in the context of establishment. So we'll start to see this improve in terms of our understanding, reporting, and the insight and intelligence we're able to convey to board over the next 3 months. Thank you.
Ollie. Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on Robert's and expand in terms of the comms with staff. So we've got some dedicated comms resource that we've aligned to our transformation programme. We've got a very clear sort of brand and message. So there's stronger together, more care, less waste. We did an online with Steve this week, which actually went through in detail transformation programmes. And actually our aim is that we get something out every week that actually really talks to how our staff are getting involved in us delivering our programmes, giving examples of really good practice, but also highlighting and helping our staff understand when we talk about waste, what do we mean? And it is things like missed appointments, the number of cancellations, whether we use an electronic referral system versus a letter, and really trying to put some numbers around that so that we're making it real for our staff.
Okay, thank you, Holly. I'm going to move us on to the Business and Performance Subcommittee report. Is Mark's going to give that? You were the chair on that occasion, weren't you, Mark?
Thanks, and I'll take the report as read. I'll just focus on the key items to note. On the risk management side, we gave it a partial level of assurance. There's been positive momentum in amending target mitigation dates, but it's still a relatively high percentage. There's also been some improvements in the review of the risks, but we're still running at around a 10% where things haven't been reviewed for 2 months. So it's partial, but there has been improvements, and hopefully that improvement continues over the next few months. On the integrated performance and quality report, again, we gave it a partial assurance level, and that's really, again, really down to the continued long waiting lists for children's services, which we are all aware of. It was noted that other trusts have achieved accelerated improvement because they had a school mental health teams, which we don't have. But again, it's something which we are fully aware of, and the question is how we can improve that over time. Steve, I don't know whether that is something which we've ever looked at, a rollout of the school mental health team, or it's not something that we can do, or what, don't you have a view on that?
I do have a view, and I think I just would like to bring Holly in before I give my opinion on this one.
So Mark, there is a school mental health service. We're not the provider that provides that service. So in areas where the provider is the same, there's obviously a more aligned pathway. So we are currently doing some work with the provider of the school mental health service to look at how we can better align our pathway. We're also having a conversation with the ICB that as the prime mental health provider, should we be looking at our commissioning arrangements?
Okay, so thanks. Apologies for the confusion.
Well, Holly said that much more delicately than I was going to. I think if I do the second delicate bit, with having an ICB now that covers a wider footprint, one of the good opportunities is to talk about standardisation of best practice where you can see that improvement, and where there is differential levels of commissioning and investment, it gives us the opportunity as a provider to say, go and look over there because that's why they've been able to shift X, Y, and Z. So it's definitely on the table, Mark, but it's a teeny bit frustrating that we're not able to do that with a secondary provider.
Yeah, no, fully agree. Thanks, Steve. Next item was the Digital Transformation Board update. Again, we gave it a partial rating, and that was just due to the number of alert items identified in the report presented to us, which included capacity and the need to further clarify the remit of the DTB. So as they clarify that remit, as they reduce or improve the capacity issue, that rating will change. But again, people are working on that area. And the final area, which we've already kind of touched on, was the transformation program delivery update. We've given it limited assurance, again, mainly due to the level of confidence that people have in actually achieving the efficiency target for the year. As we go further through the year, that hopefully will improve. But again, we did note the improvements in the governance of the process. So I think the governance has definitely improved from previous years. But now it's the implementation, it's delivering, which is the key critical kind of issues. So those are the main things I would highlight from the Business and Performance Committee.
Any questions at all or observations on that? In which case then we go to you, Holly, for the Integrated Performance and Quality Report.
Thank you, Chair. And I will take the report as read and try and not repeat what's already been picked up by Mike and Mark through the committee reports. So I think you will see that the report outlines that we are continuing to see sustained pressure around some of our services. We know that access remains our sort of most challenged domain, and we've mentioned sort of long children and young people access waits, but also we've got a couple of services within our community physical health services that also have waits that are far longer than we would want for our patients. We also know that inpatient flow requires continuous close insight and overview. So the directorates have done a fantastic job in terms of trying to maintain the reduction in inappropriate out-of-area placements. We've got a well-established escalation process at the moment. So the minutes that our out-of-area placements go above 5, we kick into having daily meetings so that we can really understand what's driving that, but also try and help unblock issues with flow. And we know that we sort of see that sort of peak and ebb, and just for the board's awareness, we are seeing a peak at the moment. So we are currently in that escalation process. We're expecting our delivery against our medium-term plan trajectories to improve because we are doing productivity and workforce growth work through our transformation programme. But we're also doing things like focusing on reduced non-attendance and improving our recording, as well as some service redesign to improve access to our services. So the report demonstrates one of sustained pressure rather than a deteriorating picture. We've got recovery actions in place across key exception areas, and we're looking at really strengthening particularly our discharge and flow oversight and our targeted longest wait interventions. So we are setting up a weekly, we're calling it a pulse meeting, with our directorates to really make sure that we've got the oversight and grip of our services in terms of waiting times. You'll see that we also included an update on our Q4 position for the National Oversight Framework. So you will see that we remain in segment 3, primarily due to our financial deficit, but there are some areas in the other domains that we need to also focus on. So just for information, National Oversight Framework sort of segments providers 1 to 5 based on key performance indicators, and there are 5 domains that they look at. So access to services, effectiveness and experience of care, patient safety, people and workforce, and then finance and productivity. So in Q4, we were in segment 4 for access to services and finance and productivity. And I think actually the previous report demonstrates why that is and the work there that we need to do. Effectiveness and experience is actually high performing. That's in segment 1. And patient safety and people and workforce are above average in segment 2. So we're really clear about the areas where we need to focus, and we will ensure that we do that. I also just wanted to mention, because it was in our Chief Exec's report, that there has been some guidance that's come out recently around preventing unlawful access to patient records, and I just want to give assurance that we have noted that guidance. We have asked the Information Governance Steering Group to particularly focus on that guidance and provide us with a position statement. I've been working with Karen as CPO, because obviously there is a people aspect to this and making sure that we are aligned in terms of how we're going to strengthen our processes going forward. But we will take that through Business and Performance Committee as part of the Information Governance Steering update.
Thanks so much, Holly. Questions for Holly on the report? Rudolph, Mike, Steve. Steve.
Well, yeah, there's some good improvements in there, and so congratulations to everyone. I guess the 2 things for us to note, the spike in out-of-area emissions, I guess that brings a sort of slight warning bell for me, given that some of our efficiencies are looking at bed availability, so I'm sure that's your radar. But the other bit was about the CPFT reporting, which is on page 132, but basically showing an improvement in referral rates for people with non-white ethnicity. Now it's the same level as the white population. And I was just wondering whether that's either because we're recording ethnicity better, but we've not really done anything different there, or whether we've done something genuinely to improve that. And if so, do we know what it is?
Thank you, Rudolph. And yes, we are really mindful in terms of the bed-based optimisation programme, and people's nervousness, because we do see the fluctuations in terms of demand. So we're very excited on that, and we'll be making sure that we look at anything we do around bed-based optimisation with that lens. In terms of the PQF, and I might ask Rachel and Karen to also step in. Going to be really honest, the improvements we're seeing is at the moment predominantly around our data reporting, which, if we get the data reporting right, we hopefully will be able to then identify the areas where we need to make improvements and understand what they are. But I know that Rachel and Karen are sort of looking at that whole inclusion agenda to make sure that we're joined up and thinking about it from both the sort of performance perspective, patient experience perspective, staff experience perspective, and sort of outcomes. Actually, what does that mean for our patients?
In the interest of time, I've got I'm holding pattern here. If people can, I get to go to Mike, Steve Grange, Steve Cox, and then Mark.
Right, well, perhaps not for now, but I was interested in terms of the alerts on page 119. We don't talk about it very much, but I was interested in access to perinatal mental health services, which is an important service. I was rather struck that we tend to talk about gestational diabetes and preeclampsia, but actually mental health is much more common, prevalence-wise. And so
it's perhaps not a question, but it's a note to say perhaps the Quality and Safety Committee could look at that in a bit more detail at some point as an important service for patients with perinatal.
Yeah, no, it is an excellent service. It's still, I think, got to just see a few more people to meet its contractual obligations, but they do a great job for those they do see. It'd be lovely if you could take an interest in it. They are excellent people in my experience, Mike. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Holly, thank you. Two very brief things. One is having an integrated report in this way is incredibly helpful. So I think we should also respect the fact that this takes a bit of time to pull together, but it's really worth it. So it gives us that combined insight, which is super useful. So thank you to you and the team for doing that. That said, some of the things in it we might not like, but the fact that it's in one place, I think, is really important. The point I was going to make was a formal note of thanks, actually, to the directorates, particularly OPAC, our elderly care, old age services and physical care services. And that thanks gets extended to our acute partners and primary care and place partners for some really useful conversations and resolutions around what we would call Pathway 1 work. So the Pathway 1 work across our services around intermediate care, supporting discharge away from hospital and putting people at home first rather than through our acute stays. That's really important, one, to make sure people don't languish in hospitals and they're back at home wherever they can be at the fastest speed possible. And then secondly, we avoid people going in. It is very much hospital to community, part of the NHS 10-year plan. But secondly, this is more around actually working in an integrated way with our partners in preparation for seasonal changes such as winter. So big thank you to the team, because a lot of mobilisation has happened over the last couple of weeks. We've been able to unblock some quite stubborn areas of challenge that we've got. And a thank you really to the operational teams in OPAC for really moving on that one quickly. But I think, Martin, please, for the record, my note of thanks go to the ICB for the conversations they've had with Robert and I, and also with our acute partners for working through what that's likely to be. The next area we'll talk about is frailty, then dermatology, then diabetes, and there'll be a whole list of these things, but it's really good to do it together.
Fabulous to hear. Steve, and then to Mark.
Thank you. Echo those comments about the report. The integrated report is much improved and really helpful. It was a similar sort of theme to Mike's. There's a couple of alerts under the improving finance and productivity. One around planned surplus deficit in 25-26, and another around productivity growth estimates. I think it's more of a plea when we get perhaps to the Business and Performance Committee that we do the read across from this to the finance report and the efficiency program update, so we're seeing it in one place. There's obviously some important sort of concerns that we're being alerted to. It'd be helpful then to see that as part of the financial commentary at BNP and perhaps back at the board. So just wanted to raise that one.
Very sensible suggestion. Mark, can you come?
Yes, a great report. Just one question on one of the domains, the restrictive interventions recorded in System 1. It was stable between April 24 and September 25, but then ever since September 25, it's been on a continual upward progression every single month. I know the expected resolution says it's not anticipated that the current increases in interventions will endure and future months will return to average nearer target. Are we confident that that is the case? Because looking at a trajectory which is continually increasing, you start thinking, is there a reason for it being increasing every month from September onwards, or is it just a long-term blip which will change very shortly?
Do you want to add to that, Rudolph?
Yes, it was on that. I just wonder, because we often get these reports and we're told it's down to a small number of people who are very distressed and so on, and I'm sure that's correct. But as a result, we'll be looking at the number of unique patients in a period for which it is happening, as well as the number of incidents, because they are a different sort of thing.
Does anybody want to respond on that?
If I start, and then I might come to Rachel, if that's okay. I think, Rudolph, for your point about thinking about how we show the data. So I think it is really important that we understand how many restrictive interventions take place. But I think actually the number of patients gives some context behind that. So I think we would always want to obviously provide least restrictive practice. But actually, when we're telling you about our restrictive practice, highlighting actually how many patients that involved, I think would help provide some additional context and potentially draw out some different questions. Rachel, do you want to add anything?
Absolutely, Rudolph. And what we have, that was a question that's been raised, and we are very cognizant of people with autistic spectrum disorders and reasonable adjustments. That has certainly been an impact there. So it is being looked at. Don't we looked at it?
Yes, there was an issue with a particular patient on Holly's at that period, and just to add, I think your point about which patients, how many patients, is really important, because we are encouraging staff to report every single instance. So during one episode of very difficult to manage behaviour, there might be multiple incidents that have to be recorded separately if someone's restrained in a different position, if they're secluded, if there's rapid tranquilization. So we need to get into this in more detail when it's being recorded accurately, but we need to explain.
Super helpful. Just a little bit of thought again about what we're actually recording. I think would be good. Can we move on then, with thanks to Holly and colleagues for the report, then to with you, Mark, for the Audit and Assurance Committee.
Sorry, just getting to the right kind of page. There's been 2 committee meetings since the last public board. One was on the 24th of June, and that was an extraordinary meeting. The main kind of item was the approval of the draft accounts, annual report and accounts, and also the draft quality accounts. So both of them were recommended for approval and approved by subsequent board meetings. That was the main purpose of the meeting. There was a meeting last week. Unfortunately, given it was only last week, we couldn't get the paper in time for this board. But just to summarise the key information, we had the presentation from internal audit. There's only been one review since that they highlighted, which was a cyber assessment framework review. This is slightly different than normal reviews. There's not a typical rating. What they were doing was reviewing our self-assessment of our cyber security. They generally agreed with most of our ratings. There was 2 areas where they think we overstated, that we were partially compliant versus that we achieved the standard. But they've given us a medium rating, which again is a reasonable rating. So that was internal audit. Internal audit are going through an external quality assessment in the final part of this year. We normally give substantial assurance to the work of internal audit. When we see the external quality assessment, that hopefully will reinforce our view that internal audit is doing a very good job, and we give a reasonable rating to the outcomes of their kind of work. On operational risk, we gave a partial rating. We've already discussed it previously. Again, that was mainly due to the number of overdue mitigation target dates, and also the number of risks which are waiting review more than 2 months. The board assurance framework, we gave a partial, again, because the work is still continuing. Again, good progress has been made, and there's a board development seminar to go through kind of that work. So hopefully, again, that will change kind of over time. Otherwise, we had a clinical effectiveness annual report. Jim presented it to us, again, which we thought very much appreciated. Again, a lot of good work, and it gave us a good degree of assurance. And finally, policies. I won't cover it anymore because we've already covered the policy topic. But again, we gave her partial assurance to the policy level of compliance. That's a quick summary of last week's meeting.
Thanks very much, Mark. Any questions at all on that? Just a reminder that the annual report and accounts will come to our annual members meeting at the beginning of October for final adoption, and it's wending its way through Parliament at the moment.
We're in a queue at Parliament.
We're in a queue. All right, I'm sure there's lots in the queue. Thank you, Martin and Mark, for that. I'm going to go to you then, Steve, for the Cambridge Children's Hospital update.
Thank you. So this is a report from the meeting that took place on the 4th of June. Our next meeting is on the 17th of August. The progress that's set out is towards the full business case preparation. So a lot of work that is continuing with the intention of that being submitted later in this financial year. You'll see in the report the priority areas are the work with the construction partner to get greater clarity and certainty around costs, work on a joint venture to oversee the build design management of the building, operational models for integrated care going forward, and developing operational models for integrated research. That sort of summarises the focus for CPFT. There are two particular areas where our focus is at committee, and there will be others as we go through the year. One is around the joint venture and understanding the legal and contractual elements to that in order that we are able to be satisfied with our position in that arrangement, and we're in the process. Colleagues are getting advice together for presentation to the committee on the 17th of August that we will then bring back to the board subsequently to that. The second is around finding alternative options, locational options for the services in the Ida Darwin site, something that will need to be vacated within just over 2 years. And again, it's important that we have that come forward, which I think is making good progress for our meeting in August, and again, potentially for the board to consider subsequent to that. So those are two immediate areas for the committee to be looking at. The business case, the full business case itself, is something that we will be coming back to frequently over the next few months ahead of a decision that the board will be asked to take early in the new year on that. The highest risk to the project, which the project team is working very hard to address, relates to capital cost and capital availability, and colleagues at CPFT across the exec and others are working very hard with our partners in the project to support finding solutions to that. So I think, Chair, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks very much, Steve. Any questions or observations, Steve?
Steve, a quick question, please. Bottom of page 2 of your report, it talks about the work that the Trust is doing with the provision of the electronic patient record. So one of the areas that I think is a potential risk is if the bridge between ourselves and what is proposed as an EPR isn't effective to record the mental health activity, then that we may have to retrospectively do something around that. I'm aware that there is a lot of discussion. Is there an update on that? Do you know?
We were due to have an update this month, I think.
Okay.
We're expecting that in August. We discussed it previously at the committee and at the board. And it's a really important point that we get the connection across to mental health services. There are examples of that working successfully under the EPIC model elsewhere. So we've taken some assurance from that, but the detail still to come through. So I think we're expecting that in August as well.
If there is an issue, Chair, through you, Steve, if there's a concern on where our involvement is, if you could escalate that quickly, please. I know, Holly, you're on top of this with Jonathan and co, but I think it's a critical issue for us and our participation in this. Then I can pick that up with CUH directly. Thank you.
Great enough.
Some of that detail has come to me via the clinical authority, so I can give you a better side of that if you'd like to pass it around.
Okay, thank you. And you can have a little conversation outside the meeting. Okay, Steve, we'll look forward to hearing what happens in August, and hopefully there will be progress then through the rest of the year, presuming that this board can be assured as to how things are going to work in practice. We now move into our people and culture, and I'm going to Pri for a report from the people and culture subcommittee.
Thank you. So this report follows the meeting. We're talking loud enough to pick it up. This follows the meeting that we held on the 18th of June. I'll pick out some of the key highlights. We noticed that sickness levels had reduced, which obviously has an impact on ability to deliver services and just about how it feels to work here. We noted the improvement in the appraisal rates, but we're still concerned that it's below the target level. We've noted, thanks to the successful introduction of a new payroll service and also a new occupational health service. I did want to thank the staff that were involved in introducing those. For Freedom to Speak Up, there was a concern about some of the key themes were about civility and respect, and we are very conscious that the culture of the trust does rely on staff being treated well by patients, service users and colleagues as well. And so that is something that we will continue to look at as a committee. I won't dwell on policies, but it was discussed, and we are concerned that we still have, albeit a small number, still out of date coming under our committee. With service visits, there were a number of outstanding actions, so we did just raise a concern about those. We were presented with the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Annual Report. We did note, we were pleased that the strategy is being developed and that the PCREF is also being embedded trust-wide rather than it being just looked at under the lens of EDI. And we do think that is really important. We had 2 presentations from staff networks, and we are as a committee asking the networks to come and present to us because they are a really important part of how the trust hears different elements of staff voice. We are concerned because we rely on the inputs from the networks and we do ask a lot from those chairs. I think a lot of them have challenges in terms of devoting sufficient time to their activities, and we don't have a solution, but I think we just wanted to note that we welcome their inputs and really value them, but I think we need to think about how we're able to recognise and deal with that. The cultural delivery plan, there was a lot of work being developed in terms of a new talent management strategy, and that will support across the trust for career and professional development. Also, there's an educational strategic delivery plan, which will support education across the trust. We were pleased to see the learning and development end of year report and did recognise the breadth of work that the team have delivered over the last year. And also very pleased to see that, having started from quite far behind, the consultant job planning completion rate is much higher. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pri. Any questions coming out of that report? So
Sorry, can I go? I can just provide a couple of updates on progress if that would help.
No, that'd be
or
fine.
would you rather just take questions?
No, it's fine.
I think probably if I can give some update around this. With respect to policies, SOPs and so on and so forth, with respect to policies, SOPs and general compliance, we have a JCMP meeting tomorrow with RTUs, a couple of policies to sign off there. So I'm anticipating that the number of matters outstanding will probably go down to 1. I did want to emphasise what Chief Exec said earlier with respect to policies moving forward and still being valid, even if there's a date that might be further in the past. Really important to say that as a matter of priority, whenever there is a change in employment legislation, we make changes absolutely spot on. We don't wait for scheduled policy updates. The other thing I would say, it's the time of the year when NHSE just buries us in a load of policies. So We are, for example, and I'm picking it up because it's absolutely pertinent to the point that Pree made on inclusion. We are dealing with NHS staff standards coming in, which is going to go into NOF in October, but we are doing an analysis at the moment to see how far off we are with recommendations or not. And the good news is you'll see in the future reports we're actually not that far off, which is tremendous. However, we have got in PCREF, in RES and in the race observatory standards, and we are actually going to be part of a community of learning on the NHS Race and Health Observatory. That's incredibly important to us. And with the 7 anti-racism principles, the language is all slightly different. And that's an enormous challenge for us because we have to consolidate, align, make sure that we can translate that into outcomes. In some respects, we have to guess what the NOF outcome is going to be. And that actually does take a lot of time away from us. We haven't cracked doing this in a more integrated way, which is slightly frustrating, but is a recognition of our just girding the loins thing and cracking on with it, which is really important. With respect to inclusion, Pree is absolutely right. We need to embed this right the way across the organisation. So Rachel and I are co-sponsoring on PCREF. Rachel and I are co-sponsoring on inclusion more broadly because I have the Chief People Officer guidance for Ockenden. The reality is CPO guidance for Ockenden applies to all of the other main reports that we've got going on at the moment. So it's to assure that whilst, we're partial in a lot of this, there is an awful lot of work going on at the moment, and you will start to see that coming forward. But it is particularly important around inclusion, culture, and just generally civility and respect more broadly. There are lots of different inputs and levers that we can control on that, and we are seeking to more actively control and influence.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karen. And I think, is it actually our first public meeting?
It is.
Right, I didn't introduce you at the outset. So, Karen is our interim Chief People Officer, and you're very welcome to CPFT. You've been here for a little while, but this is your first outing at a public board. So for those who haven't met Karen, I'm sure you will do in the future, to governor colleagues who are on the call. All right, so Karen, we stay with you for the People and Agency Exception Report.
Thank you. So again, for the reports, I'm really seeing that colleagues have been able to read it. There are a couple of things I just want to alert us to. The ballot, we have a result of the ballot and there is a mandate to strike. It's a 10-day notice period.
By consultants and
It's by consultants and specialists. You're absolutely right.
It's just consultants.
Just consultants, right? So we've got the mandate.
Threshold.
Okay, thank you.
This was important to me.
Yes, it is. You're absolutely right, Caroline. Thank you. Thank you very much. So it is So thank you for that clarification. So there is the mandate to strike, and of course, as soon as we've got the 10-day notice period, we will be working with colleagues CPRR to ensure that we are able to see as minimal a disruption to patient care as we possibly can. The other things, just to note, it's pleasing to see a reduction in ER cases. I'm still slightly nervous that we've got the number of employment relation cases that we've got. It's critical. You can see that the bulk of them at the moment are related to sickness. That obviously has financial implications with potential needing banking agencies. So there's a huge financial component to this, never mind just the reality that we want this to be a great place for people to work, and that's a contributor to keeping our sickness levels low. Just with respect to appraisals, I absolutely note the findings of the committee, and just a point around talent management. Appraisals are a significant part of our talent management strategy, and we will see in future reports the work that we are going to do around that, and that will help us with all of this and increasing the pace around getting our appraisals done and them being more meaningful, both culturally but also in terms of performance management and well-being and so on and so forth, which is really positive. Time to fill, I recognise you'll be concerned about, because we've seen a slight increase in the time to fill on some vacancies. There's a number of reasons for that. We have some hard to fill roles. that we're still dealing with, and you can't just magic up people on hard to fill roles. So that will always be something that we're keeping an eye on. We're very mindful the redeployment will also slow down time to fill. I gave you, we were in the 60s on the 1st of July. Our redeployment number is down to 55, but we still have to take that into account. We are looking at influencing on redeployment to see if we can't actually improve that. Again, that impacts our financial position, and you will start to see over the next months the influence and the impact of increased vacancy control, which we've referred to in the report as well. So I'll just leave it at that and leave it for colleagues to ask questions. And just on that, given that Stephen and I are still relatively transitioning, it may be that Stephen contributes, which would be great.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Chair. Thank you very much, Karen. I mean, I've got very little to say, and I've been uncharacteristically quiet today as well, which is probably not such a bad thing. I mean, I think there's only one thing to say really is obviously we welcomed the service visit and the team, and I think there's a sort of a read across in some of the challenges they face actually around ETs and that sort of thing, and also the redeployment process. And I think it was really helpful just to sort of open that up as part of the service visit into corporate services. So I think that's really positive. And then finally, appraisals. It is just to say yesterday there is now a national consultation around a sort of an approach to appraisals. And I think it just builds on what you were saying, Karen, around we're getting lots and lots of sort of stuff coming down from the centre around the people agenda at the moment.
And Stephen, thank you for the reminder, just because I'm conscious, Rudolph, we have spoken on a number of occasions about the more these things come through, it's more burdensome for clinical colleagues in particular to actually focus on the stuff that we need to do. And, we are looking at how we perhaps streamline, make better the need to attend training. So there's multiple different things that we can do about that, and that's very much our intention. And finding the balance between what is said we must do versus what we actually ought to do, and what we can do more locally within the trust that will actually be more beneficial. Thank you.
I might posit a view that looking at mandatory requirements for non-executive training would be a good starting point.
Yeah. I couldn't possibly comment, but I know the point.
I'll ask you to note it, Karen.
Although the compliance number is still my issue at the moment, so I would ask colleagues to please do help us out with this, because it is difficult to say to staff, do this if we're not doing it.
Thank you. That's great to hear, including about mandatory training. But I want to ask about the staff wellbeing side of things. So there's a bit about staff being off sick, and there's a point that we see regularly that you can't know whether mental illness is related to work or not. I guess we could ask people. So we know that.
You're absolutely right. And so this is a really difficult one for us, Rudolph, because we have some really particular legal obligations around work-related stress and penalties that apply if we are contributing to that. Undoubtedly, there are circumstances for people where home is a big contributory issue. And what we will always do when we are providing support, and we do actually at the Trust provide a broad range of opportunities for staff to get support, that is always considered in whatever the response is. And even though, you could argue we just want to take a very narrow view in terms of managing our risk around work-related stress, it is the right thing to do to provide support in terms of the whole experience that our people are having in their day-to-day lives. So we do our very best on that. It's, also sometimes people aren't always comfortable in sharing the causes of feeling poorly or less well.
I completely agree about the response. I just wondered as an indicator of how our staff are feeling, whether the rate of perceived workplace-related stress is a thing.
So I will, next time, I will bring back, so the team are doing a broader analysis for me around current cases and ETs. I want to see the contribution that is making. I need to stop now because I can't give you accurate numbers and I don't want to waffle.
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Karen, thank you. I'd just like to put on record, if this is okay, Martin, a significant thank you to Stephen in his executive role for being guardian and custodian of the people function for many years. And as we know, that one of our key recommendations that came through the CQC was the appointment of a voice of people solely at the board through a chief people officer. So it's a formal thank you to Stephen for holding on to that portfolio, often at his own cost in terms of juggling that with other portfolios, and a big welcome to Karen, who A, is fabulous, and B, helps us meet our CQC recommendations. So thank you, Karen, but no pressure against that. And you know, we won't go into it now, but I'm really pleased that when we start looking at the strategic direction of the organisation, whether we start to look at businesses, partnerships, whether we do our AFT application, then that frees Stephen up strategically to do the stuff that he's really good at. So I just wanted to put it formally on record as a thank you, and then as a welcome.
Right, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question, and Caroline, you may probably have some thoughts on this, is that whilst this paper looks ahead, potentially, I hope not, to different set of industrial action coming our way, it also makes reference to some industrial action that had been part of the fabric of life for a while through our resident doctors. Can we be confident now that through that settlement, which is quite comprehensive, that A, we're equipped to meet the requirements it places on us, and generally our resident doctors are going down with the deal that has been agreed?
I think I'll need to go away and find out a little bit more about the funding arrangements for the pay award, which is something I'm decided on, Chair. But from a point of view of the morale of our doctors, it's our resident doctors' morale's been reported as very good, and I think that's reflected by the numbers of people who actually took part in industrial action, which was probably around a half to 2/3 of the workforce, which is lower than most similar organisations. I do think that there's a really important piece of work to do around supporting our resident doctors, and some of that has already started. And I know Catherine is meeting with them regularly, which is really appreciated, because a lot of this it's more softer things around their working conditions that aren't being heard and their concerns being listened to and addressed. So that's a piece of work we'll be taking forward. I think there is a risk that the next time a pay award is agreed, that there's a potential that there's further conflict, but building on our local relationship with our resident doctors is really important.
Karen and then Mike.
We're also going to be going out to visit all of our doctors, actually, not just our resident doctors from a people function perspective. So I'm going out to various meetings. Chief Exec is coming to some meetings as well. We're meeting clinical directors, and I think Chief Exec was at a meeting last week, and it's important to offer that visibility.
All right, Mike, sorry.
No, it's all right. I think I'm right in saying in the 10-point plan for resident doctors, there's supposed to be a non-exec lead, and I just wonder if we've got one.
I think I volunteered, but haven't heard back.
Right, thanks, Bree.
But thank you. If you want to volunteer, Mike.
We can talk about it over coffee then.
I'm glad there's competition for this.
I'm sure you're not going to fight each other for it. I'm sure it'd be good to have a non-executive sponsor for the work, and if we've got two willing and able folk to do it, that's brilliant. We'll just make sure we sort it out. Okay, thank you so much, Karen. Really welcome your first report into the board. I'm going to then go to the use of the trust seal, another item that always brings me excitement, but none this month because we didn't use the trust seal, which is good. And those who perhaps are not as familiar with the trust seal gets used when we're signing big contracts or making amendments to things. So it's not a desperately exciting activity, but Martin and I get excited about pulling it out and doing the work, don't we, Martin? So Martin, I go to you to to just speak to the annual review of fit and proper person declaration, which is something we are both required to do and we welcome doing, which is undertaken by members of the board.
So, thank you, Chair. There is a requirement for us to annually, and actually on an ongoing basis, but for this purpose, annually review the compliance of all board members in relation to the fit and proper person regulations. We used last year's assessment as a baseline. Those of you who were around last year and those of you who joined since last year, the information supplied during recruitment. So essentially, there are no issues to escalate with the remuneration committee. Was I get the right committee there? Endorsed the submission, so we are fully compliant with the NHS England requirements, and we've received that confirmation back from the regional director.
Richard.
I was wondering, there's a reference to CQC having inspected us.
Sorry, I should have mentioned that. There was a stray reference that ended up in the board members version. It was correct on the website and board effect. That last bit of that sentence should be removed because it was a hangover from last year. So apologies.
Okay. And in the same vein, we have our annual declaration of interest register, Martin.
So there is a requirement under the 2017 regulations related to conflicts of interest that we need to periodically publish the register of interest of decision makers, which are defined as board members within this trust. This is our permission. I did check with each board member individually around about 2 or 3 weeks ago, the accuracy of this. So if there are any corrections, we'll have to make them. It's purely for noting.
Okay. So I would invite everybody again to just check your entries to make sure they are absolutely accurate and up to date. And if anything changes during the year, to please let Martin know. Thank you, everybody. So that brings us to towards the end of the meeting. We had no questions submitted in advance from members of the public or from governors. We do have a couple of governors with us online, so I'm just looking to see Raj there, whether you've got any questions at all today.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Raj, anything from you? I stress it's not compulsory. Don't worry, you're having trouble getting off mute.
Okay.
Anything at all?
Sorry, are you talking to me?
I was, Raj, yeah.
Okay. Just to say that, I'm undergoing some service from OPED, and I'm really pleased with the efforts that they're making.
Oh, that's great. We started the meeting really positively, and that is a fabulous way to end. So hugely grateful to you for that, Raj, and to yourself and Claire for valiantly staying with us through the meeting. So I'm going to move to close. Say thank you so much to everybody who's attended, all the hard work that's gone into the papers in advance, and all the hard work that goes on day to day in the trust. Indeed, we should never underestimate just how amazing the things are that happen every day here. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you again soon. We'll close the meeting. Thank you. Thank you.